What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. We're going to be taking a break from the van video, and we have a video coming up next. It's going to be the FXLR versus the FXBB on what to expect when you're looking at the two, because those are the more popular choices in the newer Softail line for the M8s, which is going to be a direct segue to Harley Davidson. I know a lot of people have been touching base on this, and I figured that we would just give our 2 cents into the video. But before we go and dive in, be sure and check out our Instagram as well as some of the links in the drop down section below, which is one of the many ways to support the channel. Now let's talk about Harley Davidson in 2020. We have the COVIDness just all over, and a lot of companies are starting to adapt, and some are feeling the pressure from the lack of sales, the lack of foot traffic, or online traffic. Harley Davidson is no exception. We recently went to the dealership to talk about bikes, and the manager of the local Harley Davidson had mentioned that Harley Davidson is cutting a lot of their motorcycles until 2021. I forgot which ones he mentioned specifically, but the ones I do know of is going to be the FXDR. I believe that they are going to be doing away with the Sportster model, and they're going to be rebranding it as something else. Now, previously they had done away with the Dynaclass, which was it shook the world of Harley, and even myself, I for sure thought that those new M8s were hideous, just absolutely ugly. I couldn't believe that they took away the dual shocks and they left us with one. And out of all those, I thought the Fatball looked pretty good. It was like the ugly type of attraction where it's just, you don't know why you're attracted to it, you think it's ugly. And then we went and test rode them because why not? And we rode the Fatball first because that was the one that we enjoyed the most. Aesthetically, it was the most pleasing to the eye that I enjoyed. And the inverted forks was definitely something to look at. And after riding that one and riding the Lowrider shortly after, I was sold on the Lowrider. I loved the Lowrider, but we didn't purchase a Lowrider till later that fall. And we said goodbye to the Dyna, got to the Lowrider M8, and I've been in love ever since. The platform of the monoshock with the Softail platform is just awesome. I love the way it handles. But how is Harley going to manage with this? My thoughts is more so thinking of a rider, and yes, you can still apply some type of business approach to how Harley's going to go ahead and deal with the current climate regarding motorcycle sales. But at the same time, their main goal is, yes, let's attract newer riders, younger generations of riders. That way they're with us for longer and they spend their money over the bike. But at the same time, they're more concentrated on new sales. The more they sell out, because I believe that the sales resonate within those persons that you fit them onto the right bike, perfect. But then they turn into a rider for life, and you're constantly helping them dial their bike in, because as the times progress, there's different things that come into the mainstream, essentially what's cool and what isn't. Like for a while it was the big wheel baggers and the slant bikes. Now the big thing in the forefront is going to be your club style bikes, and then now it's going to be performance baggers is the main thing. So it's just being able to help your customer evolve is one thing, not be concentrated on just selling more bikes, more units out the door. I think that's one thing that they could really grow on, and that goes hand in hand with that is going to be make your bikes more affordable. Here's Harley saying, we want younger generation, we want newer riders, etc., etc. But yet here they are throwing Sportsters out at 10 grand, 12 grand, but at the same time that also helps push them to more of a mid-class bike, like your cruisers, of your Lowriders, your street bobs, and so forth. But those are 15 to 16 after TT&L, wheel and tire, all the good stuff. You're close to 18 and change. And then if you want a Road King Special, you're like at 23, 24. You want a bagger, 28, 29. It's like, yo, you're in there pretty good. Your newer rider is probably going to be college age, maybe late, but then they're over here buying pre-owned because it's much more attractive than picking up a $30,000 loan. And it's, I don't know, I think that's one thing that they can improve upon, and maybe introduce the Sportsters, is eliminate maybe the 48, maybe the 72, and throw out the Roadster, make it your mainstream Sportster bike, and have different classes on it, kind of what the Indian does with their FTR. Even their Scout does pretty good. That it's just your main class, and you have different packages for it, where you can have the Roadster be tracker build. You got your Roadster kind of be your long miler, where you have more of your taller T-bars, your apes, maybe saddlebag attachments, and you can have that sold through Harley, where your Sportster itself, the body, basic bike itself, that you go, hey, I want that bike, it's maybe 7 to 8 grand, just get you in there, get you started riding. And then after that, you can upcharge your packages. If you want the FTR pack, you know, maybe do 4 or 5, and it's going to include a whole lot of stuff, and go from there. But for sure, and then do something similar with your cruisers and then your baggers, where they did a great job with the standard, the Electric Light standard, where it's your introductory bagger. It helps you bump up from your cruiser class to your bagger class without that steep of a ticket that you're like, oh bro, I literally just bought a freaking SUV for the price of a bagger. That's why we got close to it, yet to commit to a bagger, because when I look at it on paper, that is a freaking truck. That's an F-150. That's what my van cost me. That my van was selling for $19,000. We did our trade, and then we ended up financing $8,000. Where it's like, yo, that was pretty dope. And so I just can't do that. You have a whole vehicle to do it. Now, if that was our main means of transportation, if we had absolutely no need for a truck, a van, a car, sure, ball out, invest in it. Or if that you just have that type, or if you have that type of income where you can afford that type of vehicle, go ahead and do it. You know, it just all depends on the person, but trying to make it better for the general rider of Harley, I think that's one way to approach it. And with the other classes of the cruisers and the baggers, going back to that, is make your standard of everything. Like, there you go, bud. For example's sake, have a standard version of your Street Bob. I think they came down with the Softail Street Bob standard. Have a standard version of the lowrider and all the other classes of the bikes, and then do an S. That way you can upcharge the S. Also, also, plan ahead for your customer to mod. I understand this is where they make their money too. I'm not denying that, but the Street Bob on the Softail comes where the wheel is milled on both sides, which will allow for dual disc front brakes. The lowrider, the regular lowrider, does not have that option, which I think would help a lot, because then if I had known that, I might have done. That's the one thing I wish that the lowrider did, because the previous version of the Dyna lowrider had it. The regular lowrider had it, the S had it, the dual disc front. Now you don't really need it, it just aesthetically looks dope. It's one of those like statuses, like, yo, I got dual fronts. What? Because it's expensive. You have to get a new lower slider, and then you have to do the dual brake line, get the additional rudder, and it can add up after a point in time. And lower the price across the board for most of it, and that would allow them to lower the cost of overhead across the board, because that was what they were trying to do when they eliminated the Dyna, because they had different chassis across the Dyna model, the Sportster. You also had the Bagger, and now the M8 Softail, which off the top of my head I'm going to say is 5 or 6 different bikes. You have the Sportster frame, and then you have your touring frame. Because again, Harley's being Harley, where they're trying to stick to only selling Harley Davidson parts. But what if they started to partner with additional companies that they do certain features? Like, what if they reached out to S&S Cycle, said, hey, let's go ahead and combine on this project and do, instead of Screaming Eagle, maybe do SS and then do like S and Screamin', or Screamin' and S Cycle, Screamin' Cycle, something where they partner up on product, where it be push rods, tappets, etc., and then they do a performance product that really helps Harley kind of on the forefront, that really helps change people's perspective on what Harley can do. Because honestly, when it comes to aftermarket parts, I don't even consider Harley, and especially with the whole it might void your warranty, I just don't think it's worth the cost, because it's sometimes even more expensive than some of these aftermarket parts that produce better numbers, that produce better performance overall. Or another way to look at it is, if Harley decides to keep their pricings firm on how they have it now, because people are still buying their bikes, maybe not as much as they want, but maybe have more of a promo where you have the trade up. Isaac made a good point on this, that you have your trade up option when you get a Sportster. You can trade up for a cruiser, kind of a bigger class bike, and they'll give you market value for, and they'll give you what you paid for your Sportster, and that helps you get into a bigger class bike, because some people buy a smaller class bike thinking that the power is going to be extremely different. They're not comfortable with the bigger CC motor, and so they buy a Sportster, and then they realize, oh, you know what, I want more from this. This isn't where this wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or maybe they just outgrew the bike. Whatever the case is, that there is that opportunity, but maybe do something similar where they offer that for cruisers to touring, or after a year, if you decide, hey, you know what, I would really like to get into a bagger, maybe offer an incentive to trade up, and then they just get you at either a higher interest rate, or they make you finance through their bank, Eagle Mark Savings, for another year. So that way there's something that they get, whether it be instead of being in the front end, they get in the back end of the deal, and it helps people get into a different bike. And I think that would be an interesting option. Or just also offer crazy incentives like, oh, for this month, like let's say Black Friday, that they say for this week only, we're going to do baggers at this pricing, where if say you have a Road Glide special at 25, they're going to say we're going to do Road Glide specials at 22 or 20, shoot, even 18, let's say 18, but they have a stipulation where you have to, and you can't cancel it, that would be interesting, where you at least have to get your wheel and tire and a year and maybe 2 years of extended service plan, where it kind of makes up that where yes, they may lose some money, but they're going to be moving bigger units at more of a loan, perhaps make the loan at so much of time. Now you could pay it off at that time, but that way it's at least kind of covered, that they have the possibility of end up getting someone a loan of getting someone into a loan for 5 to 7 years. And there's all kinds of ways to look at it that I think it's interesting, because with them stating they want to attract a younger market, but yet still knocking out their listings, their products at extremely high cost, I think it's kind of just stating their intentions but not doing anything to move forward with it and actually implement that into effect. Because if you look at other brands, a freaking 1250 GS adventure bike from BMW is 18 now, minus TTNL, etc. But you have a fully modded out bike that you can take off road. That pretty much the only thing you would want to change is the rims. There's going to be the wheels. If you want to go from spoke to supermoto, get kind of that aesthetic, just woo mud. And then maybe the exhaust if you want more of a not so stock sound. And that's pretty much it. Then you're just going to get the panniers and maybe the gear. But for the most part, you have a fully modded out, lots of travel, and also off-road capability for maybe 24, 25, then whatever the interest rate is that you get with your loan, or if you pay cash, whatever. As well as an R1, that you have a race-ready bike with a whole bunch of electronics, 18, and then you add the TTNL and all that nonsense, that you're still way under a bagger, way under. And now the sport bike isn't going to be as comfortable long touring, so that's kind of great. That's not that great of an example, but for pricing, that's kind of what it is. But again, also some of the sport bikes, most sport bikes tend to be a lot of plastic, and then you can also buy the sub cage for it, and that's going to tack up the price. But the adventure bike, it's going to be your lighter metals, still a fair amount of plastics. And so maybe that's where the cost difference comes into play, because Harley still uses a lot of heavier metal parts. Is Harley going to be able to recover? Because they had announced that the Street Fighter was going to come out, the Pan America, even though we always call it Pan American, I think the Pan American has a better roll off the tongue. That those were expected to come late 2020, which would be the 2021 series motorcycles. But now they've been pushed further into 2021, where they're actually going to come out into the year of the 21, instead of usually how cars and all that newer model stuff works, where it's usually the fall of the year before it comes out, the later models. That I don't foresee them coming out with that model bike that's going to be too new, with them suffering, unless they do one of the two, where either they offer crazy incentives to jump into that, where they say, kind of what they're doing now, there's a dealership here where it's saying no payments till 2021, so you have about 4 months of no payments. You can do 0% interest, or there's another stipulation that you can choose if you qualify depending on your credit. That's pretty tempting, because they had me look at their website and just browse their inventory, because I was curious, like, well, what can we do with this promo? But we didn't end up going that route, just because it was like, we're really starting to dig the low. That they release either one of the bikes and have an introductory price, say, hey, this is a new model, introductory price of so much. Again, I think that Pan American is going to be 19 to 20,000, thinking of Harley pricing, and that's being generous. More than likely, it's going to be 23 range, and who's to say the suspension's actually going to be worth it? What do you think? What are some thoughts that you have that Harley could adapt and might help them sell to a younger market? or also help them move units? Do you believe that if they were to introduce your standard version of a bike at a lower cost, and as well as an S version at a higher cost, kind of what Harley charges now, or do you have another idea? Drop it down in the comment section below. I would love to hear what each one of y'all have to say, and just kind of build a conversation as to what do you think the future is for Harley. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and while you're there, bump on over and hit that bell to be notified of any future video when they drop, as soon as they drop. And until next time, appreciate y'all. Ride safe. Catch y'all in the next one.